You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hey, Justin. I'm wondering if you've done anything like cool or interesting lately. Seen anyone cool? I don't know.
Yeah. I guess you could say that. This time last week, I was in Minnesota to visit you and Sean.
Dun, 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 dun.
And so we, it was incredible spending time with you guys. I loved it. We went to a cabin up on the North Shore of Lake Superior and saw the fall leaves, and it was gorgeous, and just the views of the lake. I really understand why that's like one of your favorite places to be. It's just so calm and just, it was good to connect with you guys. It was good to be in the same like physical location.
Yes.
Like, it's great to talk every couple weeks here,
Sure.
but there's something different about like, sitting across a table and like we're right there. So it was really special, and I just appreciate you hosting me, and it was really great. It's been really fun going back at looking through the photos of everything and just kind of reliving it a little bit.
So listeners, Justin and I met like on Instagram,
right?
Like, years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, just through caregiving stuff. And then started the podcast without ever physically meeting each other. And then was it 2 summers ago?
I
3
think
summers
so, yeah.
ago. 2 summers ago.
2, I think.
That Sean and my mom and our daughter and I spent a week or so out in Washington, and then got to meet Justin and Sarah's mom. Right? Yeah.
Yep.
So that was the first time we had physically met. And we got to spend like a day and a half-ish together.
Right.
But that was it. So then you planned this a long time ago. Like,
yeah, that was kind of a risk.
It was a huge risk.
I knew it was like, things can change. I know, I understand how things are, but I figured let's at least write something on the calendar in pencil and see what happens.
Right. And I think you had been like, okay, because you had never been to Minnesota, and you're like,
Correct.
When's the best time? And we figured it out. We were like, October, the beginning of October is the best time.
Yep.
And it was so funny because like, you'd been planning and you were asking all these questions, and I was just like, it was so far in advance. I remember at one point I didn't want to think about it because I knew that fall meant that Badeline would be at college.
Oh,
and I was like, I don't want to think about fall because that means she'll be gone.
Yeah, right.
And so then when it finally came, I was like, oh, it's really here. It's actually happening.
Yeah.
But my gosh, like what a gift to be. It was like Thursday to Sunday. So we had like 4 good days together. So yeah, thank you for making the trek all the way out here. And it was really, really great.
It was.
Yeah. And it's so fun because now I have been in the room I can see you sitting in.
Yeah.
You've been in the room you can see me sitting in. And it's just all this context that we now have. So imagine how much better this podcast will be. So that's so great. So great. Yes. Thank you for making the trek. And yeah.
How other than having a wonderful visitor and going up north and all of that, how are things going over there? What's coming up? What do you got going on?
Yeah. So this last week, a couple days ago, Sean had a big day that it was one of these where it was like, this could go multiple directions. So it was like, I think it was probably his 1-year follow-up for his esophageal cancer surgery. So there weren't any like concerns going into it necessarily, but it was like, we got to check. And it's one of these scary things where you don't know. It's like, you've no idea what they're going to see. Right. And it's scary that a professional is going to tell you, like if what's going on in your person's body. So they were going to like do a scope. They were going to go down, they were going to stain it, look at it with a special light, look for anything concerning, take biopsies, stretch it out if needed, and then also remove his G tube, which I won't go into all that. But last year, when they took it out, it didn't close and it turned into a whole thing. So it was sort of like, this could be a no big deal thing. This could be a huge deal thing.
Yeah.
We don't know. So skip to the end. It was all great. Like it was all the news was amazing. If, for more details, you can check out my post for listeners, but like I actually didn't even believe the nurse when she came in. Like I literally didn't believe. I thought she was probably talking about the wrong person, or she didn't understand the case. Because she's like, they didn't take any biopsies. And I was like, what do you mean they didn't take any biopsies? They always take biopsies. She's like, well, they didn't see anything. And I was like, actually, like, are you talking about Sean Breininger?
Right.
And because I just am not used to that. So anyway, that all went beautifully, which was great.
Yeah.
This Tuesday, so a couple days from the day that this episode will release, is Mo's Day. So the last time he went, they found so many spots, and that he and the team have sort of decided together that 4 is like the limit.
Okay.
I mean, and so most people usually get 1,
right?
And it's something they talk about for years, right? He gets 4 at a time every few months. So last time I think they found 12 spots last time. So they took 4, and then they said the couple that they knew they needed to take, and that they would schedule for the next time, and then they biopsied a bunch and then waited for the results. So they already know that 4 more need to happen, and know which ones they are.
Yeah.
And then there's more. So they actually at one point had said, okay, put the next one on the book. So we haven't done that yet.
Right.
It's just this endless, terrible cycle.
Yeah.
That's coming up. So
can you explain just for listeners who might not be familiar you don't have to go into the graphic detail, but what a Mohs procedure is.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially it's when they find a skin cancer spot, they go and they first surgically, like they numb it, and then they remove that spot, or including the spot around it, to make sure they get it. And then they just sort of slap a quick bandage on it, take it to the lab right away, check and see if they got clean margins. If they didn't, they come back, they take further, right? And so they keep doing that until they're sure that they got clean margins. And then when they're done, they go through the process of closing it, which, depending on the size of the site, can be pretty intense. And the person is awake through all of this. Okay. So it's a lot of needles. It's a lot of slicing and dicing and cauterizing and the things.
Yeah.
So the thing I want to talk about today is the impact, because he has had, I always say 150, but I keep not upping the number. I mean, maybe we're at 200 by now. I don't know how many. He has had so many of these. This was the very first symptom he had, was skin cancer.
Okay.
So for 13 years, maybe 14, because it was before the diagnosis even happened.
Wow.
We've been going through this regularly, every few months. And so, and I have always sat in the room for these because I'm like, I am the caregiver. I'm here. I'm here to make sure that his needs are met, that he's comforted by me, that he's comfortable, that I'm advocating, all the things. And so I've always sat in the room, and we have this one surgeon and there's another one in the practice. And I've always heard that other one does not let caregivers in. And I've always thought I would fight that man. Like if that man was like, you're not coming in, I'd be like, oh, really? You think I'm not coming in? I'm coming in. Right.
Yeah.
And so I've always been in the room.
Right.
And as you can probably imagine, after 14 years, it's taken a toll on me.
Right.
These Mo's days really have started to kind of like mess with my head.
Right. And these are long days too, right?
These are long. The last time we were there, 7 hours.
That's it.
Yeah. And I'll spare you the details, but imagine all of my senses are taking in ways in which my favorite person on the planet is being hurt.
Right.
But it's also this catch-22 of like, I'm actually asking these people to hurt him and I'm actually paying them to hurt him. And so I can't stop them, but I kind of want to punch him in the face.
Right.
But I can't. But you have to be nice about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really started to mess with my mental health as well.
Yeah.
And so I've been working with my therapist on like, what?
Yeah, right.
Like, what can we do about this? And so thinking about, the overall topic I want us to go into today is, how do we balance the caregiver needs and the patient's needs?
Right.
Because he can't opt out.
Yeah.
Right. And I see my job as his caregiver as doing anything I can possibly do in my power to ease hard things for him. So knowing that me being in the room eases it for him, because I'm advocating and I'm holding his hand and I'm whatever, and opting out of that feels like I'm failing at my job.
Yeah.
Feels like he doesn't get to opt out. Why do I get to opt out?
Right.
If he's suffering, I should suffer.
Yeah.
And his suffering is more important than my suffering and all of that. So I've got some plans in place for what I'm going to do on Tuesday, and we can get into that. But I'm wondering, like, it's interesting when I said, I feel like if I'm doing that, I'm feeling my job. And immediately you said, yep.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like, when you hear that and you hear, like, you weren't like, oh, no, da, da, da. You're like, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not taking it as an attack on me. It's an attack.
No,
You know, it's
how we feel as caregivers.
Exactly. And I think this links perfectly to our last episode about what is a perfect caregiver, right? The perfect caregiver squishes down all their feelings, does whatever it takes for their person, puts their person's needs, emotions, priorities, top. And theirs are like maybe not even on the list.
Yeah.
Right. And we know that that's not okay. And it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
If this was like, you broke your leg, I'm going to be with you during this broken leg thing.
Yeah.
That's different. Right.
Right.
But for so many of us, this is a long-term thing.
Yep.
And if we continue to just say their feelings are up here and mine aren't even on the list, it's not going to work, as my nervous system will tell you. So I'm going to pause because I just talked a lot. You tell me, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think what really resonated as far as this whole thing that we're talking about is like they can't opt out.
Yes.
Like they have to experience whatever it is, whether it's a horrible day of chronic pain at home. Yeah. Whether it's a terrible procedure like you've had experienced so many times, because they can't, it somehow feels like a betrayal if we choose not to engage in that or not to also witness that or be there to support them through that. And yeah, that's a difficult thing to kind of, I don't know, think through and figure out how to approach it from a sustainable way. Because like you've said for yourself, 13, 14 years of this, that understandably takes a significant toll. It also takes a toll on Sean, certainly. But for you to be there absorbing everything that's going on in the room, feeling like you probably have to be super vigilant the whole time to just make sure that they're attentive to what he needs. So you're not in a state where you can be with your emotions necessarily, maybe. Is that accurate? Yeah.
Or even the zone out. Like he can sort of like, he puts on earbuds, sometimes an eye mask, like he zones out. Yeah. But I don't feel like I can zone out because I'm feeling like I need to be alert and watching. And being alert and watching means seeing and smelling and hearing all the things.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So 2 words that hold on, I just want to pull out 2 words that you just said that really struck me. One is betrayal. Right. And that, I think we should talk about that because it feels like, that's what it feels like. Right. The other one is absorb. Yeah. Because I think that's exactly like when I think about what I'm absorbing on those days, it's like, of course it's taking its toll. Right. And so I often leave, like the last time he had one of these, it knocked both of us out for a couple of days. He recovered. And at first it felt like, oh, well, of course, like I felt garbagey. He's covered in bandages. This makes sense. A couple of days later, his bandages were gone. You know, like he was doing so much better and I wasn't. Right. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Yeah. I'm not bloody. I'm not bleeding. I'm not this. But you think about that word you just used, absorbed. Right. So you can't look at me and see that. Yeah. But I absorbed all of that as well.
For 7 hours.
For 7 hours. Yeah. And I just don't, but I don't have the bandages and the scars. Like anybody could look at him afterwards and be like, holy crap. Like, that guy just went through something. Yeah. But you wouldn't look at me and see that. But I did. Yeah. You know,
absolutely.
And I also, the thing I want to say quick is, yes, it took me 14 years to like put my foot down about this. Right. That's not a good model. I am not modeling well for us caregivers. I'm not saying that we need to wait 14 years or to wait until your nervous system is like, right. And in fact, my therapist has said, I have been mad for years that those doctors have let you go into that room. She's like, I think it's irresponsible that they let you watch that. Right. And I was like, well, until recently, I would have fought them. Yeah. Right. Because I think I was so engaged in this, like, this is my duty. Of course, I'm going to be in there. Of course I will. You're going to let me in there. And now to step back and be like, oh, like, and I'm not going to get into like, they shouldn't have let me in. Right. Right. Yeah, like, whatever. It's more like I felt before, like, oh, this is where I need to be. And there was like no other option. Yeah. And I'm just now starting to be like, maybe there's another option,
Mm-hmm.
but it's taken me this long,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's clearly like as caregivers, we're trying to, what we're doing is trying to meet the needs of the person we're caring for.
Yep.
And, we've talked about all kinds of times how we focus in on that and we forget about ourselves.
Yep.
And sometimes the caring that we're doing, maybe we want to take care of ourselves more, and there's just a disconnect and we're not able to as much because we're doing so much caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a different discussion probably here, but to be able to find that balance between, yes, their needs need to be met, but also my needs need to be met.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly if this fits in, but what I was thinking about leading up to recording this is there's that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
And, making sure, certainly we want to make sure the basic needs
Mm-hmm.
of our caregiver or the person we're caring for are met.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's like, if there's something to, okay, their basic needs are met, are my basic needs being met before we go up a level to meet their, I don't know the whole hierarchy, but before we get to like meeting all of their needs all the way up,
mm-hmm.
going back to ourselves. And if we're not being met at the most basic level,
mm-hmm.
something needs to shift.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love that you're bringing this up.
Okay.
I think the interesting thing is that so the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy is physiological. So it's breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the next one is safety and security.
Okay.
Right. So I could, at first I was like, ooh, good. But it's like, but if I'm going to get in my head about this, I could say he feels more safe and secure when I'm in that room.
When you're in the room. Yeah.
I can advocate better if I'm in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, you said, sometimes we're just so in it, especially I think when we're maybe new caregivers or when we're in an emergent situation, we're not even our needs. We don't even have the brain space to think about our needs, right? There's that track. Then there's the track of, I see my needs, but I don't know how to meet them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the track that so many of us are on is, I see my needs and I still rank them lower.
Yes.
That's what I've been hearing. I feel like our support group about the perfect caregiver was so powerful.
Yeah.
And that's what just kept coming up. And that yesterday we did an event, and I feel like that's what I just keep hearing over and over from people is well, but I'm not the one who's sick. Well, exactly. I'm not the person. Well, I'm there for them. Well, their needs are more important. Well, my need, it's like, if we even recognize, even the times that we do recognize that we have needs, they are never at the top of the list because we're not the ones who are sick.
Yeah.
And my therapist and I were talking about this the other day, and she was like, what if it's just, what if it didn't have to be a ranking?
Right.
What if it could be an even playing field that everybody's needs matter?
Right.
And there isn't a ladder of whose needs are most important.
Right.
But it's an even playing field. Now, that felt lovely to me. But again, what does that look like in practice?
Yeah.
Because again, on Tuesday, we have to make this decision, right? And as caregivers, we're constantly triaging. When Bailene was little, that was the hardest part. Whose needs do I meet? His or hers,
right.
his or hers, his or hers.
Yeah.
And now that she's sort of less in the daily picture, it's more his or mine, right? It's oh, look, mine are on the table. That's exciting. But still, it feels like this pull. And so I think that part of it is that we need to realize that, yes, we are not the one with the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And yet we are worthy, right, of wellness.
Yes.
That we are absorbing all of this. I think about things like the statistic that people with head and neck cancer, their caregivers have the same rates of PTSD as the patient.
Wow.
And that in some types of cancer, the anxiety levels of the caregiver is higher than the patient.
Wow.
Which makes sense if you think about it, right? Because we're taking it all on, right? And so when we think of it that way, it's how can we say, whoa, yes, our needs matter too.
Yeah.
Which every time often when I do a support group or a webinar, we start with some sort of grounding in. We often have some kind of phrase that we think about. And often one of those phrases is my needs are valid, or da, da, da. And when I say to people afterwards, what did that bring up for you? often they're like, ha,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like that's what the kind of their response to that is
Yeah.
like, or they're like, my brain knows that.
Yeah.
Like on some level, I know that.
Mhm.
Like, sure, yes, of course my needs matter.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, no, absolutely. My person's always going to be first.
Right. It's my needs matter, but
Oh, yeah.
they're
yeah.
not the most important. Or
Right.
my person's needs are more important.
Yes.
Or yeah.
Yes.
There's that qualifier on it.
There's always a qualifier. There's always the ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So what I had started to think about is like, I can't, like I had gotten into a headspace where I was like, I can't do these most days anymore.
Right.
I cannot. And then that sort of got me into this, like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So a phrase that I've shifted it to is I can't keep doing it the way I have been. So it doesn't have to be like, I can or I can't.
Right.
It's I can't do it the way I have been.
Yeah.
What could it look like instead?
Uh-huh.
So like I've been thinking about for Tuesday, and hopefully people can like take this model and like apply it to other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a continuum. So I have been going into that room, sitting in that room all day, watching everything, smelling everything, all the things, right? So that's one end. So if I scooch back one step, it could be, do I go into the room only in the waiting times,
right,
while they're sending stuff to the lab and sit in there with him, but I'm not in there while they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Another step, do I bring him, wait in the lobby?
Yeah.
And stay in the lobby. So I'm in the building, but you know, the next step to the whatever is I drop him off at the door, pick him up at the end.
Yeah.
The other step further is like somebody else drives him. He takes an Uber, right? Walk yourself to the appointment.
Right.
So I've sort of been thinking about that continuum and like, where do I feel like? And so I sort of played out, like, I know I don't want to be in the room for the slicing and dicing. And then I played out, what would it be like if I was just in the room in the in-between times? And I decided even that felt viscerally like, I don't want to be in that room.
Right.
Like that came through loud and clear for me. I don't want to be in that room.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, all right, good to know. So then I went to the next one. What would it feel like to be in the lobby? And then I thought, okay, that feels less triggering. But also, if I'm in the lobby, does that actually help anybody?
Right. What are you doing there?
Right.
What does it benefit anything to sit in a lobby for 7 hours?
Right.
I mean, that's
versus
draining for you without providing any support for Sean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he and I talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, I said to him clearly, like, I've come to the place where I can't be in that room anymore. I'm either in the lobby or I'm bringing you and dropping you off. Like, what do you, he too was like, doesn't make sense for you to sit in the lobby.
Yeah.
Like, you can drop me off. So that's what I'm going to do on Tuesday.
Okay.
And this feels like an enormous step.
Yeah.
It feels like, even as I say that, I'm like, oh, people are out there judging me. They're listening and they're judging. They're like, oh, caregiver F. Oh, I thought she was good. Oh, I thought, well, if I would, you know, like, that's what I feel like listeners are doing right now. Right. And so I feel a little like, obviously, I'm still got my feelings about that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, but if we go back to like if we say his feelings are most important, he feels like he has been amazing about this because he's the best. And so he was like, you do what you got to do.
Right.
You know, like, I want you to, like, if it's that hard for you to be in that room, I don't want you to be in that room.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, I am blessed with like an amazingly understanding and compassionate partner, which I realize that not everybody is going to have that. Right. So anyway, I feel I'm talking a lot today, so I'm going to pause and let you hop in. Sorry.
Well, first of all, I think it's what you're choosing to do for Tuesday is, I think that's really brave. I think that's really, I can understand that that's a difficult choice to come to, but I'm proud of you for
thank you
advocating for yourself in that regards, because I think that is certainly a more sustainable approach.
Yeah.
Given the trauma that you've experienced over a decade in going to these, which is more than I can fathom. Yeah. Relating to this. So good on you for that.
Thank you.
I'm
going to need you to keep saying that to me.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Like, I don't know if have I ever cried on the podcast. I don't know. Anyway, point is, like, clearly this is hard.
Yeah, it is.
So even for you to be like, I'm proud of you, like, I'm like, thank you. But what about the judges? Or what about like, I don't know. So anyway, I'm going to usually keep saying that this is the right decision and that I'm not failing as a caregiver.
You are
I'm
absolutely
not being like too needy, or I'm not being too this or that, or I don't even know all the words, right? Because okay.
Yeah, I think that what matters is you and Sean. And he's supportive of you doing this. You're taking care of yourself. And I think that who cares what other people think? And that's easy to say. And I know that that's hard to actually put into practice. But I will keep saying that. I will keep reminding you that.
Thank you.
I'll be there on Tuesday to let you know.
Yeah.
And you'll get through it. It'll be different.
It will be different.
It'll be different.
Because even like the fact that I get to like drive home feels, like I'm cheating.
Right.
Like I'm cheating that he has to be in that terrible place, and I'm going to drive home, sit at home for the day. It just feels like, why do I feel like I get to cheat? Like I get to not go through this hard thing.
Yeah.
But I know I need to.
You need to. Yeah.
So I'm also glad I'm saying this like on air, because then I can't back out.
Right.
I can't on Tuesday morning be like, just kidding, I'll go in.
Right.
I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'll just go in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as caregivers, our needs matter. And we need to take care of ourselves. We need to make sure that our needs are being met, that we're in as good of place as we can be, because we are human. Because I think it's easy to fall into I need to take care of my needs so I'm better in a better situation for caregiving. And that's true, but I think we need to go deeper than that and just we're human. We deserve to not be, I don't know, worn out and just spent and exhausted and traumatized. Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to the fact that like our person can't opt out, and it feels like you are to you. I'm not saying that as as a judgment on you, but you got to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And like you said, he has things that he can do to zone out to some extent. So it's a team that has worked on him presumably a lot, is familiar with the whole situation.
Yep.
And they can handle it.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too, is like I provide comfort. So we talked about, are there things like he's got his earbuds? What if I send him a song? What if I send him a voicemail? And he was like, no, I just need to zone out. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Or do I send him a little, I don't know. Is there something he can hold on to? Whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, that's cute, but I'm fine. So there's the comfort piece, but there's also the advocacy piece.
Yeah.
So there's that piece too of like, like people who follow along with my stuff might know that like last time there was this fellow who was like the worst. And I think would have been worse if I had not been in the room.
If you had not been there.
So then there's that, like, what if they don't notice? What if they this? What if they're like terrible, And that's an extra layer of the what ifs. And like what if he comes out of that day and is like, he was the same guy, or he was terrible, and then is the guilt gonna, So I mean, one thing I think I'm gonna do, and obviously we have a good relationship with this surgeon, but I'm gonna like send him a my chart message this weekend and just say, here's what we've decided. I'm not gonna come in the room anymore. And then I'm going to try to say to him in some way, like, step up your A game, man. Like, I typically like watch for these, you know what I mean? And so, and remind him, because he had said last time after we complained about that fellow, he said, I think that from now on, I will only work on Sean. Like, I will not have any of my residents or my fellows. And so remind him of that.
Yeah.
So I can sort of advocate on the front end, I think the other thing is that Sean, especially as a person who's gone through all the things, but also as an Enneagram 9, doesn't advocate for himself and hasn't had to.
Right.
So I'm always the one that's like, looks like he's shivering. Can somebody get him a warm blanket? And so it's sort of like passing off this torch of like, if you're cold, you could ask for a warm blanket.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Which even that feels a little bit like, oh, I'm asking him to do a thing, you know, but like, it's probably a good thing to take on,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So something that just I'm thinking about here is we, frequently talk about give examples from our experiences,
Mhm.
and we both have great relationships with our partners
Yeah.
in a way that I think we can have these conversations about, I can't handle this. We need to change how we're doing it. Find a different spot on that continuum.
Yep.
And feel like we can have a good conversation and feel heard and seen and all of that talking to our person.
Yep.
There are numerous caregivers who are in vastly different
Yep.
situations with the person they're caring for.
For sure.
And that could be just due to personality difference or relationship strain that was there prior to caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
It could be because of cognitive changes. They're in a different place. And so we've been talking about you and this change that you're making and how difficult and hard that is to arrive at that. And that's with a supportive partner.
Yes.
And so I just want to acknowledge how much harder it must be to navigate the needs of the person I'm caring for, the needs of myself.
Yep.
And I don't know that I have an answer for how to do that.
No, I'm glad that you're saying that, because you're right. I mean, even with like the best relationship ever that Sean and I have, I was nervous.
Right.
To say like, I need to talk to you about this, you know, and it was great, like it was a great conversation, but I still felt nervous. And so one thing I wonder about is using the system, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't have to play this card. But I could have said, my therapist has said that she really does not feel like should be in that. Like, she's not going to let me be in that room. Right. Like I could hear a person saying like, rah, 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 but like, so using, instead of it coming, like if it feels like it's easier to come from someone else than from you, or even I could, I wouldn't do this with Sean, but if it's a situation where, you could go and say like that, because I know that this other surgeon doesn't let caregivers in there to say they have a new policy and they're not letting caregivers in anymore. Do you know what I mean? And so is there a systemic or a different quote expert person who can say and stand up and say like, actually, this is, and if I'm happy to be that person for anybody, like the people that I coach, I always say like, just blame your people don't know me. Just blame me and be like, Allison says that I cannot do this anymore. Like I don't care if your person's mad at me. Yeah. So I think that is sometimes more helpful, like than us sticking up for our own needs and our own self is having an outsider say.
Yes. A neutral third party.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Especially if they have some sort of title, right? That might help. It's not just like, oh, my girlfriend says that, it's like, oh no, my doctor, my therapist or your doctor, like, because I think even if I had honestly said to this surgeon, like, it's really impacting my mental health to be in the room, he would have been like, you shouldn't be in the room. Yeah. So is there that kind of thing that you can use? So it's not you saying it. Is there, even if it's like, if your person's like, absolutely, I need a person in the room with me. Can you shuffle the deck a little bit so that like sometimes it's someone else who's in the room and sometimes, so you know what I mean? Exactly. Even if you're in the room or whatever the case may be, that it's less frequently than every single time. Yes. And your person might be like, I like you the most. Yeah. Thank you. And, like it's not gonna, it's just not sustainable for me to keep, and I hope that people can hear that it doesn't need to take 14 years to get to this point, but how can you learn from what I've gone through to preemptively like realize like, whoo, this is a lot. And like preemptively set some of those potential boundaries up for yourself.
Yeah. Cause it's one of those things where, after 14 years of something that is a well-worn
Yes.
path of how this is handled, of what we
Yes.
do. And it's hard to make that change
Yep.
after that long. Whereas if you're a new caregiver and you've done a procedure once or twice, or
Yep.
this encountering the situation for the first time, if you can advocate for yourself right away
Yep.
and form a new path for both you and who you're caring for,
Yeah.
that for both of you, you understand that this is how
Yep.
this goes. That if it's someone who does, I don't know, that, they don't get used to you always being there until you're, can't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something, if you're a newer caregiver, to kind of hear and
Mm-hmm.
to think about, because I
Right.
think there's so many opportunities early on to set yourself up to have a more sustainable model of caregiving that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yep.
if you know these things. Now, like, I was kind of thrown into it, and I didn't
Right.
I don't know, I couldn't find, or didn't have the energy to find resources, and
Right.
so you survive.
Yep.
And so if you are in a situation where you've done something a certain way for so long, this is not to say that you've been doing the wrong thing.
Right.
You've been surviving. You've
Yeah.
been getting through, and that in and of itself is amazing.
Yes. And I think it's a moment to say, just because you've done it this way for this long, doesn't mean that's the way you have to keep doing it.
Exactly.
Because did we know 14 years ago that we were going to be doing this terrible thing this often? No.
Yeah.
We had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think there's that piece of like, just like for me to know. And I even, so we even had an appointment with the doctor where in between these, where I said, because I felt we were on this hamster wheel of just like, we would go, we would get the appointment, that they would say, see you in 3 more months. And I was like, is there a better way?
Right.
So we had an appointment with the doctor as well about, I said, I think we just need to pause and say, like, is there a different way? And then he said, oh, did you know that things like we can offer Valium to him? I'm like, nobody's ever said that before.
Right.
And he even said things like, you could do fewer at a time. You could go to this different clinic if this clinic is triggering. And I was like, really? French?
Yeah.
It really took you, me sitting you down to. So we also talked about what are other ways to provide that they can provide him more comfort. That doesn't always have to come from me.
Right.
But I keep thinking my therapist and I have been talking about this a lot, which is why I keep quoting her, but that she said something about taking up space in our marriage. Like she's like, I think it's time for you to take up a little more space. And I was like, interesting. Because I think that most of us caregivers would be like, I don't get to take up any space.
Right.
There's no space for me. Like they're all 100% of the pie. But she was like, what would it feel like for you to take up some more space? And so because I've been telling Sean about how this has been feeling for me a couple, like last week before the esophagus thing, he was like, how are you feeling about Thursday? And it kind of like knocked me off my feet for a minute, because I was like, that's my line.
Right.
Yeah. But it felt so kind that he was realizing that these days, because I've been talking about it, he's realizing these days are hard on me, and asked a few days, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, wow. There, and that didn't take anything away from him.
No.
Right. And then I think in some ways, like the quote patients sometimes feel like great when they're able to, they can do some caregiving. You know what I mean? They can do something. And so I think he actually felt good that he was able to support me in that way and all that stuff. But it's just been an interesting picture for me to think about, like, my needs get to take up some space as well.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear that it's never been him saying your needs don't matter.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Like, I think that's a thing to pay attention to. Like, it's been me saying his needs matter. And so what does that picture look like if our needs taking up some of the space as well?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great kind of way to phrase that. Our needs taking up some space and us taking up some more space. What I think is, you mentioned there is like you sat down and you had a conversation.
Yep.
And we have to have a conversation. Like if you want things to shift, if you feel like you need a different way to go through these things, like if you're not telling the person you're caring for, telling the people that are in your team that things need to change, or that you are spent, that you feel like your needs are just at the very bottom, things aren't going to change.
Right.
And it doesn't do you any good to just keep all that inside and keep ruminating on it.
Yep.
Like certainly having a therapist to talk to and go through all of that is one thing, but that's just retroactively
sure. Right.
helping you with it to some extent.
Sure.
And until you like have a conversation, like you're not taking steps necessarily to shift. And it's like you said, just because this is the way we've done it for 14 years, that doesn't mean that's the way we have to continue to do it.
Exactly.
We can change how we do things. And to shift, if we can shift towards supporters a little bit. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to say here.
No, that would be, let's do it.
Like certainly we talk a lot about how supporters can just ask how the caregiver's doing, can like acknowledge that the caregiver is going through something hard and all of that. And that's great. That's good. I think this is a place where taking some action and seeing that there are needs that likely if you are supporting a caregiver, they have needs that are not being met for all of the reasons that caregiving is hard and all of that. And doing something to allow more of those needs to be met. And that could be, there are hard days at the clinic or, procedures or treatments that they have to continually go to. Can you as a supporter be the person in the room? If you have that relationship with the person, can that load be shared or handed off?
Yep.
Or what else can you do to allow, more of the needs of the caregiver to be realized and to really think about what actions you can take as opposed to just saying the words. And the words are incredible. The words are very supportive, but this is, I think, an area where it can make a big difference to translate that into some concrete action.
In my notes for today's conversation, I wrote supporters and then I put support this.
Yeah.
So you just said, words are fine, but I am thinking for me on Tuesday, words are going to be everything.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like supporting a caregiver's decision to take up more space.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So I feel like if on Tuesday this episode comes out or I put on social media, like I've decided to drop him off, I know I'm going to be hyper aware of those comments. And if anybody's like, well, right? Like even if 1,000 people say like, good for you, right? That one person who's like, I don't even know what that comment, right? I don't even want to play the game of like what that comment might be.
And you can delete that comment. So you don't have to see it too.
I have to. I'm gonna have to. But do you know what I mean? So I think it's the logistical piece of like, hey, like, would it be helpful? I imagine this is the toll that these days take is intense, and so I'm wondering if your person would be comfortable. Would be happy to take them on this day or right. So I think you're right. It's the action so that they can step away. But it's also the supporting them in that action. So exactly what you did for me a few minutes ago of like, this is a big deal and I'm proud of you and I'm going to be there supporting you, across the nation, this on this day, and so I think that that's huge because, like for all of the little voices in our head that are like, you're not doing it well, you're failing them, you're right? Like we need 1 billion 10 times more people to be saying, of course you're going to stay home.
Yeah.
Of course you are. I am proud of you for making that decision. Yes. Way to let your feelings take up space. Way to let your needs matter.
Yeah.
And so it's both, right? It's the actions, but it's also the like verbal support in a way of, and like not letting anybody feel guilty of like, oh, but don't you think he's going to feel blah, blah, blah if you're not there?
Right.
Stay out of it, Susan.
Yeah.
I don't know who Susan is. I just threw that out.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what are you going to do on that day?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So there's a meeting on the books that I had already said to those people, like, I don't know if I'll be there. I mean, I do feel like working is probably, to me, I think to my brain, it feels like I don't feel like I should go do something lovely. Right.
Yeah.
Do you get that? It
get that.
feels like that feels like super cheating
Mm-hmm.
to go do something lovely. And so I think that I will come home and work because it feels sort of like that feels
Mm-hmm.
like, well, if I'm not going to be torturing myself in that way,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying work is torture, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it
no, I
feels
know.
like that feels like the other logical thing. Well, I had a meeting, you know?
Yeah, because like sitting on the couch thinking about how things are going all day isn't
Right.
gonna help.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And I feel like I'm going to say to them, because I even went through like, oh, but I do want to have a conversation with them about how things went.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, I'm not going in that room though. Like it was so I was like, okay, I'm going to have them call me
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day and let me know like
Mm-hmm.
how did it go and talk through all the things. So I think I'm going to like be at home, work, but not maybe in a scheduled way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Except for that one meeting, so that like I can be available on phone for the doctor, or for Sean, or for whoever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have things I can be doing that are busy, and that don't feel too lovely. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it'll be interesting to see, like, because he's going to come out of there all bloody and beaten like usual, which still impacts me, right?
For
like,
sure. Yeah.
That and the days to follow will still impact me. But it'll be interesting to see how different I feel after not also having just gone through the day itself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think if you go through that and I don't know, it feels weird, or you don't see that you don't feel magically different or better changing it up this one time. That's not reason to, oh, this didn't work, I'm going to go back to how we were doing it.
Right. Thank you. You're going to have to keep saying that to me too.
I imagine that, your body has a built-in reaction, regardless probably of where you are, to these days and then what follows. And so things like that take a long time, or can take time to unprogram and set up a different way. So I think don't judge the impact of this decision on the single instant.
Good reminder. I think about, how sometimes I say it's like trying to brush your teeth while you're eating Oreos. It's like, and so it's sort of like, for this one day, I'm just not going to add a new Oreo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And so it's not like, oh, I'm going to feel amazing, but it's like, at least I'm not adding another Oreo to the pile of Oreos in my mouth.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. I hope that I'm looking, I always look forward to the support groups that follow this, but I hope it'll be interesting to see how this translates for other people, right?
Yeah.
This is a very specific example, but I hope that listeners today can take this and translate this into some aspect of their life, right? And so some of the phrases from this that have been helpful to me that I'll just reiterate is the like, I can't keep doing it the way I have been.
Right.
And thinking about that continuum and not saying like it's either all in or all out. Like, what are the potential steps along the way? And then the piece about like, I get to take up space as well. It's not this ranking of whose things are more important.
There's not a limited amount of overall space. Whereas if I take up more space, the space that they can take up is diminished.
Right.
I don't know what that model, that's the wrong model to think of it as. I think that it's it's like a teeter-totter or something where I don't know, whatever it is, but I think that's important.
Yeah. So thank you for this conversation and you're such an incredible model as a friend. And so I already know that on like Monday night, you're going to be texting me, and Tuesday morning, you're going to be texting me, you know what I mean? And so I just appreciate knowing that I have you in my literal pocket with this words of support. And so I hope everybody out there has a Justin of some sort, but know that you all have us. So
for sure. And thank you for sharing, for being vulnerable.
Sure.
I assume this probably isn't easy to talk about.
Yeah.
And so I think it's for people to hear other people having a hard time making these kinds of decisions and wrestling with the same kind of stuff, I think is good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you're welcome. Thank you for saying that. And I think it helps us knock down this myth of the perfect caregiver.
Exactly.
That we talked about last time too, right? So if someone else is like, well, Allison goes in there every time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, nope, no, she doesn't. Not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is episode 97.
Yeah.
And for you math folks out there, you realize that means we are getting close to episode 100.
100.
What? Which is amazing because you originally said, "Hey, Allison, will you do 6 podcast episodes with me?" Way to hook me in because here we are at 97. So, listeners, as we think about celebrating episode number 100, we want you to be part of that.
Yeah.
We have set up a hotline. And for that hotline, and you can hear some instructions when you call, but we would love in the next weeks for you to call the hotline and tell us, what has this podcast meant to you? Favorite moments, favorite episodes, anything that you might want to share. And then Justin's going to do his editing magic and turn some of those comments into something. And then we will share some of those on episode 100. Yeah. So what is the number that people call if they want to do that?
The number is 360-389-2334.
Great. And you can also find that on our social media stuff and the show notes. I don't want to put you on the spot with this hard question, but what about our international folks?
So international folks, if it's not practical for you to call a U.S. number and leave a message, you are more than welcome to record a voice memo on your phone and send it to our email address, insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. And we can use that as well if that's an easier way to do it.
Great.
Yeah.
Or if for some reason that doesn't work either and you just want to email us so we can read it out loud.
Yeah, for sure. That's fine too. Yeah.
Awesome. But it'll be very fun to hear from all of you.
Yeah, and, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, that line is up and running now. And so give it a call and then, more instructions when you will be on the recording. So, and then, yes, we'll have a support group on this topic, which I think people will have a lot to say about.
Yeah.
Coming up. So look in the show notes and social media for the date for that as well.
Yes.
And if you want to get alerts for the support groups, right to your email box, you can go to www.thenegativespace.life and go to For Caregivers, and there's a whole support group link. And there you can put in your info, and then you just get an email in your inbox every time I schedule one. But we do one attached to every one of these episodes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, my friend. Thanks for the good talk.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
When you said a minute ago, I'll be there with you on Tuesday, there for a second, my brain was like, "Oh, you're coming back." So that would be amazing.
Yeah.
But it's too bad that you live on the other side of the country.
I know.
All right. Yeah. We'll just keep looking at our pictures from last weekend and reliving that. So, all right. Thanks, friend. See you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.